So, you want to turbo your car. Classic. You want to make more power, you want to make some cool noises, and of course you want to make a bunch of dudes think you're super cool. Trust me, I get it. But turboing a car can seem so overwhelming. There's so much to it. There's so many parts. How do you know what turbo is right for you? How do you know if all your parts are going to work together? What even is tuning? And before all that, most importantly, is my engine even safe to turbocharge? That's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to do a compression test and a leak down test so we can determine the health of this motor so we know whether or not it's going to blow up. I'm Zach and this is Money Pit. We're finally starting to do turbo stuff for the next 6 weeks, baby! Are you ready?
Thanks to Ridge Wallet for sponsoring this episode.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm gonna have to see some ID, sir. Driver's license, passport.
Okay, yeah, I got.
Ooh. You are screwed.
Look, James, I gotta go. It's me. I gotta go host a B2B.
Sorry, pal. Rules is rules. Why don't you skip on back to Never Never Land, Mary Poppins? Because we ain't having it here.
Okay.
That was easy.
Thanks to Ridge Wallet for sponsoring this.
No! In a second, you're gonna drop your wallet and it's gonna ruin your life. They're not gonna let you onto the set and then they're gonna let Uncle Jerry host Bumper to Bumper.
Hold on, what? Nobody wants that.
I know, man, you gotta use one of these. It's a Ridge wallet and it's made with durable materials like titanium and carbon fiber. So you only need one wallet for the rest of your life. And they mean it, it comes with a lifetime warranty.
IDs, please.
Okay, yeah, I got Wow, that is durable. Here you go.
All right, he's cool.
Okay. Thanks for saving me, Future Joe.
Sure, Jerry, no problem. But we can save even more people by telling them to go to ridge.com/donut. And if you use code DONUT, you'll save 10%. But you gotta hurry because time is of the essence. Ah, looks like I gotta go. James is about to blow all his money. All right, first let's start with the basics of a turbo. What is it and how does it work? Basically, there are two sides to a turbo, the hot side and the cold side. The exhaust from your engine runs through the hot side, comes in down here, and it spins this little turbine in here real fast. Now, that is on a shaft that is shared with this compressor wheel over here. So when your exhaust is ripping through the hot side, it's spinning the fan on the cold side, which is sucking a lot of air in through this hole here, compressing it in this housing and blasting it out this outlet over here, essentially cramming a bunch of air into your engine. Now, the point of cramming more air into your engine is that you can then burn more fuel and make more power. But the flip side to that coin is that by making all that extra power and cramming all that extra air into the engine, you're significantly going to increase your cylinder pressure and kind of the beating that your engine's taking all the time. So you got to figure out whether or not your engine can take the extra abuse that a turbo's gonna dish out. So here we can see some of our potential weak links in the engine. Potential weak links are gonna be like your connecting rods, your bearings, the crankshaft itself, the pistons or the piston rings. And just looking at them like this, you're not really gonna be able to get a good understanding of whether or not they're strong or ready for a turbo. That's where the internet comes in. You're gonna have to get on the forums, do a little Googling, and if the engine you're thinking about has any weak links, trust me, there will be people talking about them. So, as long as all of the parts in our current engine are healthy, we should have a great turbo car pretty soon. But we're gonna have to do those tests and see whether or not that thing actually is healthy. All right, so we're gonna be performing two tests on the Miata's engine here. First, we're gonna do a compression test, and then later we'll do what's called a leak down test. What a compression test is a pretty quick and easy way to determine how well each of the cylinders in your engine are making compression. Your engine relies on the piston and your whole combustion chamber to compress the air-fuel mixture in order to burn it efficiently and make good power. So with a compression test, you can quickly assess the health of each of your cylinders in terms of compression. Now, you can't necessarily pinpoint what the issue is if you do see one, but ideally, you won't see an issue and then you'll just know everything's great. So in order to perform our compression test, I've got the engine warm. We just turned it off so it's nice and warm. Next, I'm gonna go put the battery on a charger because we need to crank the engine a bunch of times, and if you don't have your battery on a charger, you can kill your battery, which makes the test ineffective. All right, so now that we've got the battery on charge, it's time to go back up under the hood. We're gonna pull out the spark plugs and we're gonna disconnect our fuel system and our ignition system altogether. So now we're ready to perform our compression test. So I've got my compression test kit here, straight from the harborist of freights. I think it cost about 40 bucks, so not too bad, something nice to have around. To get this ready for the Miata, we've got our gauge, we've got it connected to the hose that it comes with, and then it's got a series of adapters depending on the size of your spark plugs. I believe this is the right one for us. So we're gonna put this on the end of our unit here. Nice and hand tight, and then we're just gonna go ahead and thread it in hole number 1. Get that puppy nice and tight in there. Now, the only thing left to do is do the test. So I'm gonna get in the car. Remember, we've got the battery charger on, and I'm also gonna, this is very important, I'm gonna hold the throttle all the way open. Wide open throttle for a compression test so that there's no reason that the cylinder you're testing can't get air into it. It should be able to get as much as it needs. So, wide open throttle while you do the test, 10 seconds per hole, and then we'll see what the number reads on the gauge.
Can I make a prediction?
Sure.
I think cylinder 4 is gonna be the lowest.
Yeah, me too, that's my concern. Miata things, baby. Cylinder 1. What'd we get?
About 125 or 130.
Yeah, right in between the two. We'll call it 130. So you might be wondering, is that good? Is that bad? Well, it's kind of tough to say. I mean, generally speaking, you're gonna wanna see over 100 PSI in any gas engine. The higher, the better. But at the same time, the specific number on the gauge isn't the end-all be-all. Really what I'm gonna be looking for here is to make sure that all 4 cylinders are roughly within about 10% of each other in terms of pressure. If one strays farther away from the other 3, I know there's probably an issue with that cylinder. So let's keep going and see what the rest of these cylinders make, and then we can compare them to each other, and then kind of get a general sense of how this thing is. Crank this thing for 10 seconds. Write down the number. Cylinder 3, you're up next. So cylinder 4, here we go.
Yeah.
120 flat. Whoa, 130. Well, that's good news. This puppy must be healthy. I have overheated it a few times, okay? And on the Miata, cylinder 4 tends to get extra hot. So I was actually worried about cylinder 4, but so far so good. Seems to be making compression, so we know it must be pretty healthy in there. It's time to do a leak down test. It's a little bit more accurate, but a little bit more involved, and you need an air compressor. Luckily, I have one. Again, you're going to want to do this on a warm engine if you can, if your engine's running. In this test, we're not going to rely on the engine to make compression. We're going to give the engine compression with our air compressor. So the first thing we need to do is get the engine, and cylinder 1 specifically, to top dead center. So to do that, there's some marks on the pulley that I can use to visually check for top dead center, but I'm also going to drop something into cylinder 1 so I can visually see when it's at peak top dead center. And that should be good enough. All right, we've got cylinder 1 at top dead center. All the valves should be closed, which means it should be able to hold compression right now. So we're gonna connect our tester to the spark plug hole and introduce our own compressed air. See if we have any issues. This is our adapter, spark plug threads, very similar to the compression tester thingy. Okay, well, this is from Harbor Freight. I forget how much it costs, probably like $50 or so. We're gonna go through it using their instructions real quick. So the first thing I want you to do is back this air regulator all the way clockwise, all the way to the left. So that's what we've got. Then connect your compressed air at no more than 100 PSI, so we are at 100 PSI, okay? So now we can see our gauge is up there. You see that little 0 where it says set, that yellow band? The goal now is to turn this clockwise until we hit 0. We want to zero this gauge out. And it's important that when you do this, you do it pretty accurately and try not to go past 0. You want to sneak right up on it. Perfect. So now all we got to do is connect this to our spark plug hole, and then we'll get a reading. A little cumbersome. Okay, so now on our gauge here, we've got a few different brackets. We've got high, moderate, and low cylinder leakage. Obviously, we want to land in the low range, and look at that, we do, at about 20%. Now, every cylinder, you're gonna have some leakage. Some air will get past the ring, so you're never gonna have a fully perfectly sealed cylinder. That's okay. You just wanna go and land in that low bracket. But the problem that I have with this is that when you follow the instructions, this actually tests the cylinder at about 5 to 7 PSI, which if you have a big issue, that's probably enough pressure to sort it out. But that's such low pressure in comparison to what each cylinder sees when it's actually running that I don't think it's enough pressure to really suss out smaller problems. So when I use this kind of tool, I kind of throw the instructions out the window and I'll do the same exact thing, but with a lot more pressure. Let me show you. So with the instructions, we zero this out, which brings our gauge over here up to only about 7 PSI. And that I just don't think is enough pressure to really test an engine. So what I'm gonna do is eventually ultimately ignore this gauge altogether. And I'm gonna crank the pressure up over here so that we're letting, let's say 40 PSI through. I think that's enough air to really start sorting out some leaks. But then since we're not gonna be able to rely on the gauge, we gotta be relying on our ears and our brains. So we'll explain that in a sec. Okay, so now we've got about 35 PSI in cylinder 1 right now. So now what you want to do is listen for leaks, and depending on where you may or may not have a leak, that can tell you what's going on in your engine. So if you hear air leaking out your dipstick, that means air pressure is getting past your rings and pressurizing the crankcase. That's where your dipstick goes. Pretty quiet. But if you're hearing air leak out your intake, that means your intake valve in the cylinder you're testing, for some reason, is leaking. If you're hearing air coming out your exhaust or out your exhaust port if you have your manifold taken off, that means for some reason or another, your exhaust valve is leaking. If you're getting bubbles coming out of your coolant overflow tank or your radiator, that means your head gasket's leaking. And really all we're doing here, as we test all 4 cylinders, is listening for anything that stands out. You know, a little bit of leakage past the rings coming out your dipstick is normal. But if cylinder 3 makes a bunch of noise coming out the dipstick, well then cylinder 3 might have a problem with the rings. We're gonna go ahead and do that to all of our cylinders, make sure we don't have any issues. Based on our compression test, I don't think we're gonna have any, but just for good practice, we're gonna check this thing out. Okay, so we've completed a compression test and a leak down test on the old Miata and have determined that apparently the pistons don't have any holes in them. Our cylinder walls seem to be in decent shape. Our piston rings seem to still be there, and the valves are in operational condition. So that's great. So now that we've got these tests done, I feel pretty confident that this little engine is gonna be able to deal with the boost we're gonna be throwing at it. Because again, doing these tests was really just a precursor to being able to do this. You know, we've been getting ready to turbo this thing for a while, and now it's really time. Now we've got the engine tested, we are ready to go full go at the turbo stuff. We're gonna be doing turbo things on this car for the next 5 weeks. That's right, 5 weeks of turbo stuff, so get ready. Thank you so much for watching this video. Come back next week and the next several weeks after that to get into the turbo stuff with me. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zach Job and follow Donut at Donut Media. And I'll see you guys for an exciting next week.